We do need to cover what makes a meeting lawful, but we also need some tips about how to run them a little bit better. And that's what I'm going to concentrate on in the first instance. And that little button still wants to... only the middle button. That's different.
Yeah, only.
They're all different.
So, you've got to plan your committee and plan your committee meeting. Interesting character up there on the screen. We'll come back to him in a minute and some of his friends. Now, if you're coming towards the end of your body corporate financial year, then you need to plan and make sure that you're going to have a decent committee. If you don't do that, then you'll get the committee that happens on the day. So I know there's some people here who aren't with Capitol yet, but they've planned their committee for next year. And let's hope that committee gets going. So here's some of the personnel. Now there's a guy, you sort of bloke, looks a bit intense. Wonder what his interests are around the building and in life generally. Do you think they'd be the same as this person's? I think they've both got far too much hair, but apart from that, their interests are probably going to be a little bit different. How about this one? Here you've got the dad with his young boy looking at a computer, the kid's probably showing him what to do, as they tend to do from about age 2. Again, different interests. This young lady, different interests. They're on a committee. They're on your committee. So if you are going to get them working together well, you need to understand the different types of personalities there. So it's important that you have an understanding of the need to be individual as well as the group. So what's the outcome this group is trying to achieve? Perhaps it could be something as simple as a no parking sign because they have a parking problem. It could be the case. Well, you need to focus them on it, and there's ways of doing that in the planning stages of the meeting. Now, what sort of meetings do you want? Do you want a chaotic meeting or an orderly meeting? I have actually taken over a body corporate, and that top right one was exactly the way the meeting was. The people standing were the visitors, and they had been doing that for years. Absolute chaos at those meetings, and they still do it, even to this day, I'm told. The committee meeting at the top left, that's not a good situation. We might work out how we're going to deal with that, but the two at the bottom are far better. So you need an orderly meeting, and planning helps with that. So do you want to make decisions, or do you want to have a blue, a fight? And with whom do you want to have the fight? Well, the fight doesn't work ever. A committee meeting is there to make a decision. Now I know we've got at least one building manager in the room, and we've got quite a number of committee people in the room. Sometimes committees and building managers may not be getting along. The committee meeting is not the place for the fight. The committee meeting is a place to make decisions for the body corporate. Work out where you're going to discuss the disagreements that you have between you, and on another occasion, and probably with a mediator involved. So the mediator helps enormously if there is a genuine blue going on. I've had committees which have been in two camps, totally opposed on a particular issue. They were never going to see eye to eye, even with a mediator. In the end, a whole lot of them stopped coming anyway, so that solved that problem. So who's the most important person on the committee? Well, the person puts his hand up and says, me. I'm the most important person on the committee. Really? Okay, well that's a recipe for a disaster. So you take one most important person, mix with others actually of equal importance, and continue until disaster strikes. Everybody has an equal vote. There is no casting vote in body corporate committee. There is no casting vote in general meeting. Sometimes you might flip a coin because the legislation says you can do that, but there's no casting vote. So it's important that everybody recognises everyone needs to be involved and have say. Often the key person is the chairperson. They don't have a casting vote, but they need to be inclusive. Everybody's got to feel that they're part involved. And that means they need skills to move things along. So, this is the type of person who loves to hear their own voice. Put up your hand if you feel sort of a little bit, sometimes I like to hear my own voice. Just me? Oh, you do too, Deirdre? Very good. Good, Carmel. Okay, so some of us recognise that we have that characteristic in us. But it's important that in committee meetings we can also be silent. If we are the chairperson, perhaps we need to move things along and include others, but we need to recognise that. So what other types of characters are there on committees? Well, there's often the frog. Now the frog will jump from position to position sometimes, but the frog is also very easily stepped on. So try to make sure that the frog in your committee is looked after. There are the sheep, and they will follow someone else. There's also the wheat, blowing in the wind. This year, it seems to be these people in control, I'll go over there. Next year, they seem to be running the show, I'll go over there. So very often you'll get things on a 4-3 vote and the wheat has gone with the 4. We've also got the mouse. The mouse doesn't have to say too much. But we need to include the mouse, because the mouse, if they're properly trained and properly listened to, they can turn out to be a very useful mouse. So all of these have different roles, and a good chairperson and others on the committee who can help guide as well can help make these people feel included and come to really good decisions. Now, an ideal person is the one who's really well grounded. They put down good roots, they consider things, they've grown, and they can make really good and strong decisions, which helps the chairperson who's able to, if they join together with those good roots that have been put down, the chairperson can just sit back and relax because he's surrounded by all of this strength that has been developed. So planning is really important. If you've ever just turned up to a committee meeting without planning it, it's not a good thing. So there's 7 people that can be on a committee. Again, I emphasise, at the end of financial year end, plan your committee. Doesn't mean stacking, or does it? But you need to at least know that you've got people in place. So how many on the committee? The AGM determines that number. If there are 6 elected at the AGM, then that's what you've got for the 12 months. You can't add or subtract really after the AGM. I guess you subtract if you can't find anyone, but you've gone through all the processes. Positions may change, so people sell, people resign, people move on, people depart. And you've got a month to replace somebody who leaves the committee for whatever reason. The committee replaces that person. Now, I know a building just down here at Service which had a long-term chairperson, a long-term secretary, and one other member of committee on that occasion. The chairperson unfortunately passed away. A few months later the secretary passed away, and in between they hadn't put the extra person onto the committee. They hadn't gone looking for somebody else. So they had no committee at that stage. So they had to go to general meeting to get their committee, whereas they could have handled it within the committee team if they'd been working well. A month to replace, that's about the only time in the legislation that legislation mentions something other than a number of days. Here it said a month, so it could be 28 days, it could be 31 days. It just depends on the circumstances. Now, here's a battle plan. Battle plan from an old battle. And I'm sure you've heard this. If you plan to fail, you plan to fail. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Did I say that right the second time?
Yeah.
So you know that old adage. So why would you go into committee meetings without having planned? So what do? You can have a pre-meeting. You can have a pre-meeting conference call. Just get people on the line, particularly if they live in the state. You can do a walk around. This is a fantastic planning exercise, to walk around the building together as a group, because you all have similar interests in your investment. So walk around, have a look at what is perhaps in need of some attention, and say, well, we could always put in this room, we could put in some better furniture, maybe we could put in a little kitchen and some cupboards and a fridge, and get some decent chairs. Might take a long time to get, but we'll get it organised. You can have a gathering. Now, a gathering is sometimes a meeting of committee where they decide they're going to do certain things, but they're not valid decisions, because that's got to come back to a committee meeting. I have a couple of bodies corporate that have gatherings, they do their minutes, and then they bring those back to the committee meeting, and we incorporate those into that meeting and say anything that needs to be resolved here is resolved, and we take a vote. All of a sudden, those things that they wanted to do between meetings is now resolved because it's in the minutes and there's a resolution about it. So I've got a couple that are doing that now, and they're doing it quite well. You need to plan your proxies. So let's say Julia can't be at the meeting, so she gives her proxy to Chris. Unfortunately, Stan can't be there either, so he gives his proxy to Chris. And Dennis is away and he gives his proxy to Chris. Sorry, Chris can only hold one proxy. So you need to plan. If there's going to be a couple of people away, to whom do the proxies go? You can also include people in meetings by conference call. The Commissioner has made decisions regarding that, and it's perfectly lawful. I have a lot of people who are owners from interstate, particularly with Gold Coast property, and so some of those attend the meetings by conference call. But plan it, get it organised. Now, sometimes the committee's in dispute. Now you can see this guy here from the committee. He's actually looking at something that's pretty similar to himself. So committees actually, even though they're in dispute, they actually have more in common than they have in difference. They may disagree on one particular matter, and so that puts them in two camps. But let's work together on all the common ground and then sort out what the difference is. But it shouldn't be a big argument at the meeting. People should say, well, we've got different views on that, we'll probably have to adjourn that to the next meeting, that aspect, and let's get on with the meeting and get the place running. Now, non-members can attend. There's that old meeting again. I won't tell you which building it was, it could be a bit embarrassing for them. There is some legislation regarding their attendance. It's important that you are consistent. So the legislation says you're an observer, sit there and listen. But the committee or the chairperson could decide to let them speak. Now, the way I've often handled it, if Deirdre's coming along to be an observer at the meeting, as the chairperson, I've often said, Deirdre, welcome. It's great to see you here as an observer. You know the sort of way that it works. But before we start, is there anything in particular that you would like to bring to our attention, something that's brought you here in particular, or are you just here to watch? And that given, Deirdre may have 2 or 3 things that she's absolutely champing the bit. She wants to get this out. If you do it at the start of the meeting, then people have got it off their chest. They've said it. They now know that if you're going to talk about it later, you'll probably be asked to leave anyway while they consider your application or whatever you asked for. That's fine. Often people will leave after they've got it off their chest. But if you leave them sitting there, they're just spewing to get it out. So it's often the way to go. But if you want to be firm on the legislation and say, no, not going to happen. Our policy is you're an observer. That's fine. Be consistent, however, whatever you do. So my suggestion was follow the law. Now, you're supposed to give notice of meetings for 7 days. 7 days notice for a committee meeting. However, sometimes you need to have a meeting shorter than that. It's just got to be held. Might be assignment of management rights, who knows what it is. Regardless, you can reduce that down to 2 days if all the committee members agree in writing, and that could be an email. So if they agree, no, don't vote, they just agree in writing to shorten notice down to 2 days, that makes the meeting lawful. So keep that in mind. It can be used on occasion. So the quorum. If you've got a committee of 7, the quorum is 4. If you've got a committee of 5 or 6, the quorum is 3. So it's 50%, sometimes 50% plus a bit. If it's 3 or 4, then the quorum is 2. So here's a meeting that I held. The guy over this side is me. Was in earlier days. And that person over there is the committee member. And we're having a formal meeting of committee. There were 3 on the committee. He had a proxy. And somebody else didn't turn up either. So we had a committee meeting with 1 person. We had a quorum, 3 on the committee, 2 people present. 1 there, 1 by proxy. It doesn't say you've got to have 2 present for committee meetings, only for general meetings. It bothered me a bit when he started arguing with himself. Now, don't start meetings too late. I had a building at St Lucia. They would start their meetings at 7:30 at night. They were still going at 10 or 11. One meeting even had to go into another day. I think there was some problem with police or something, and the whole building went into lockdown, and they were still there the next morning. But on this particular occasion, the chairperson who'd been in the position for years and insisted 7:30 start. Some newer people on committee started to get up his nose a little bit. They were getting aggravated by the time of night. He was cranky because it was getting late at night, and he resigned on the spot. That's it. I've had enough. Boom, I'm out. Yep, get out of here. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. So it was because it was too late. You don't start meetings that late. People are just too tired. I mean, sometimes I'm tired when I go home. Sometimes I go to bed before 7:30. So please don't start meetings for me too late. And don't let them run too long. Now, I know this to be true because I got it from Wikipedia. Now, you can only have maximum concentration, most people, for about 8 seconds. I wonder about some of those rugby league referees, but anyway. And most people can only sort of concentrate and be in a meeting, and you've done very well today, for 40 minutes. That's why the length of school periods is around about 40-45 minutes. Because the kids have lost interest long ago, but their concentration skills are finished on whatever task they were doing instead by the 40-minute mark. So don't run too long. A meeting that goes all day, I believe, is a waste of time. And it's usually a talk fest for one of those people with a megaphone, rather than really getting down to good productive business. For an agenda item, it's important to be concise, be inclusive of all members. Now, if you say to your little mouse, what do you think about that so-and-so? And they say, I've got nothing to add, but I'll be supporting it. That's fine. At least they are feeling included, and they're not feeling that they have to repeat what somebody else has said or come up with a brand new way of saying exactly the same thing. A good constructive committee meeting includes people but doesn't have a talk fest. That guy is to be avoided. If you miss 2 meetings, maybe you've gone overseas, who knows, you're allowed 2 misses a year by proxy, and you can't have 3 proxies in the same year. So you're allowed a proxy 2 times in the year. The committee may grant you leave. Now, I had a building in Brisbane that was going through some trouble because of damage caused by the building next door, and they were holding a meeting every month during that year. They had about 10 or 11 meetings that year. And one guy who was a professor at university, he was often going overseas on business. So whenever the professor couldn't be there, we granted him leave so that they didn't count as misses. Twice he was able to give a proxy, but only twice. Now, very important to understand the old flying minute, known these days as the VOCM, or the Vote Outside Committee meeting, but I tend to use the old term of the flying minute because I can make paper planes when I'm doing it. Now, here a majority is required and then ratified at the next committee meeting. The majority required can be a problem. Remember, for a committee of 5, you had a quorum of 3. You now need a majority of 3 saying yes. For a committee of 6, you now need a majority of 4 saying yes, whereas your quorum is 3. So for a flying minute, you need a majority saying yes. 6 people, majority is 4, 4 yeses. If you don't get 4 yeses, it doesn't carry as a VOC. Very important point. And not understood by a lot of people. Then you take it to the next minutes, and when you ratify your previous committee minutes, you also ratify your vote outside committee. Now, some of you, maybe in small buildings that don't have many committee meetings, and maybe your minutes are hidden underneath these cobwebs. That often happens. So that prompted me to think, all right, I'd always like to be Eddie McGuire, but not favouring Collingwood ever. Of course, far from it. Sorry, Emma. How many committee meetings must you hold in the year? So I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Who's A? At least 1. Okay. Who's B? At least 4. Who's C? No more than 8. Good. We had some people in Brisbane who thought that. And who's D? As many as the committee wishes. Okay. The D's are correct. The reason being, you don't have to have a committee meeting at all. Many bodies corporate don't have a committee meeting, and there's nothing legislated that you must have. So it's up to the committee how many meetings are actually held. Good idea to hold a budget meeting, yes, regardless of how big or small you are. So it's important for the chairperson, or if not the chairperson, then probably the community relationship manager, to say, so let me clarify the result of that. So that's 7 yes. Or you might say, I'm hearing 5 yes and 2 no. So there's 5 yes and 2 no. Get the results right for the minutes, because that will then avoid a dispute later where it's been generally agreed, but there's 2 people who are talking against it at one point, and you put down in the minutes 7 yes, then that can be a problem, because no, I wasn't in favour of that. Minutes are wrong. So clarify at the time is always best. So the meeting's over, it's time for action. Now I understand there are 3 gold tickets still available in the Wonka bars. So I guess you're a real man of action, yes? Or is it time for action? Maybe it's not time for action yet. So the modules determine whether it's action time or not. Now in the standard module, you've got to wait until the minutes go out, which could be up to 21 days. And then you've got to wait 7 days after the owners have them before you can actually put matters into action. So that's about a month after a standard module committee meeting. Could be up to a month. And the reason for that is 50% of the owners could get together and change the decision of the committee. And I've been involved in a situation where that was done up at Raven Bay area. The accommodation module, however, a lawful decision of the committee is an immediate decision and it's actioned now. So I had a meeting last night in accommodation module. There was a committee vacancy as a result of the sale. First order of business was replace the committee member. They replaced the member and that person was there at the meeting, so they took their seat as a voting member of committee immediately. Decision had been made. So where do you hold your meeting and who can call it? Well, the best way to call a committee meeting is to determine it at the previous meeting. So I'd normally put down that the next meeting will be held in whatever place you've decided, at whatever time you've decided, not too late, hopefully 5 at the latest or something like that, on a particular date, which might be the 29th of November 2014, or on a date to be advised. I always include or on a date to be advised because I've had situations many years ago where people read the minutes, booked a flight so they could be at the next meeting, weren't able to get recovery of the money for the flight, and the meeting date was changed. So from that point on, or on a date to be advised. If the meeting hasn't been set at the previous meeting, the secretary is authorised to do it, or a person authorised by a majority of committee. So the chairperson is not strictly speaking authorised to tell you when the committee meeting is, unless that person is authorised by a majority of the others. But the secretary can. So where do you hold it? Well, usually it's held at the office or at the building. It can be held anywhere within 15 kilometres of the building if 50% of the committee meeting want it there. But you can hold it outside that. So, you know, if your committee wants, they can be off to Rio. I love committee meetings in Rio. Call me by name at the hotel now. Beware the conflict of interest. There's a whole section of the module, and also it's in the Code of Conduct, to disclose any conflict of interest. And you may then offer to leave the room while the matter is discussed. So my brother's diploma proposed to do the work. Well, the application involves my unit. So ideally, step out. If they say stay, then it's fine. They're probably going to approve it. But if they want to talk about it, it's better to be spoken of in your absence so that they can speak freely. Committee spending, it's normally $200 a lot, or it's as decided in the meeting and in general meeting. So you can increase that in general meeting. And the way costs are these days, I mean, it's gone up in time that I've been involved in body corporate from 100 to 200 in a couple of different stages. I've got a building down at Surface, 43 units, 65,000 they can spend as a committee. It's an old building. Sometimes they have big costs. So it's worth considering. A lot of people don't understand the 2-quote rule. I mean, always get a couple of quotes for just about anything. Unless, of course, you've got a contractor that comes out in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. to fix up the water problem on the roof, and he always does that plumbing job for you in the middle of the night. Why would you then go and get 2 quotes to replace a tap rather than just give him the job? Look after your contractors, and if he's doing over and above for you, then don't hit him by saying, well, we actually got $5 off from Joe Blow down the road. So the 2-quote rule, you must get 2 quotes if it's the lesser of these numbers. $10,000 or $1,100 by the number of lots. So small building, 5 lots, 5,500, you're going to need 2 quotes. Bigger building, 10,000, you're going to need 2 quotes. Unless you change that in general meeting. And why would you? I know some buildings do. Some buildings are often encouraged to by body corporate managers, so that the body corporate manager's quote can get through and doesn't have a second quote in the meeting. And I can understand that, but I don't know, I can't see any reason for changing that one. Now, my final slide is this, and I'm just going to let you read it, and then I'm going to read it to you again in about 30 seconds. So if all members of the committee have the best interests of the building and the owners in clear sight for every decision that is made, they're doing the good, ethical thing, as well as meeting the requirements of their code of conduct. Committees which make lawful decisions and take steps to minimise risk to the building, its owners and its residents are well protected by the law. So that brings us to the end of that.